Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here on time. We start tonight, chapter 16. I think I gave you an introduction. I showed you a nice story, and I would like to share it again because I think it's worth delving into. And then I will give you an introduction to what the rabbi is trying to achieve or is dealing with in the first half of the chapter. I shared with you about a couple who goes to a counseling, and the wife complains that the husband never buys gifts. And the husband has all the excuses and the reasons in the world why not to buy gifts. And the marriage counselor turns to the husband and says, there is no chance, even when you are right, you are wrong. You must buy gifts for your wife. There are occasions, anniversary, birthday, first time you dated, second date you went out. You have to find gifts, buy gifts for your wife to show how much you care. So the next day, the husband shows up with a huge box, real big box. And the wife is so amazed. She figured it could be a washer or dryer or a large TV, who knows what. But to her amazement, she turned to the husband and says, what's the gift all about? He says, look, you know me, I hate giving you gifts. And you like gifts. So I bought you about 150 small gifts and I put them in a big box. Every time you feel you deserve a gift, stretch your hand into the box and pick one item, that's your gift. Of course, hi. So we can do a table from there, Linda, and the archers.
I had him buy my mother gifts, and then he would just give her $100 or buy yourself a gift. Oh, that. And he did the same with us. Go spend your money, buy yourself something.
My father, my mother always tells me that my father don't know how to buy gifts. My father never buys gifts, so she buys herself gifts. She goes to the store, it's her birthday, she indulges in something. But they know it from beforehand, and the love and the relationship is not dependent on the gift. In the story, the husband was trying to get back at the wife.
Yeah.
Well, not cooking the food that he likes and not going to bed the time he wanted. So, it's a different story. Back to our discussion. Why is she angry at the husband? Because the idea of gift is to show your intention, that you like the person, that you care about them, that you think about them, that you want them to feel good. When you buy a box of gifts and tell the wife, pick up a gift whenever you like, what you tell the wife is, I couldn't care less about your feeling. Am I obligated to give you gifts? Here are the gifts. The point of the story is that anything we do, especially when it relates to somebody else, must come with an intention, with a heart. If it comes without the heart, then not only it doesn't achieve any, it doesn't connect, but it does the opposite. It shows that we don't care. In other words, it reflects the opposite of kindness and careness and connection. So the rabbi in this chapter will talk about the ordinary way to serve. By the way, whatever we talk about is the relationship between us and God, but it's a relationship between man to man the same exact way. And hopefully you'll remember from time to time to make the comparison. In order for me to have a healthy relationship with God, there are three processes that take place in order. One is the brains. The brains is convinced that what is right, or we are owed, or we owe a great deal of gratitude to God who created us, provide us, etc. Then, after we understand in our brains, it should evoke emotions of respect, of love, of caring, of awe, being there. That's the second aspect. And the third one is it must lead to action. Therefore, if he asks me a favor, I'm running to help. I'm always looking after that person to protect them, to be there for them, to say a good word. Action is the result of mind, heart, and then it comes out. The problem is it's not always working that way. We will discover why later on. Sometimes one of the three components is missing. When it comes to relationship, it's exactly the same way, but I want to talk about God because that's the focus of the Rebbe. Sometimes we have a feeling towards God, but we have no thinking process. The intellect part of our life is not connected to God. The intellectual connection to God, by the way, is done mostly during prayer. The order of prayer is actually to be able to make us understand why is it God is so great, why we owe so much to God, how much God cares about us, therefore we need to appreciate it. The second part of emotion is, in the Hasidic terminology, it's the study of Torah, Kabbalah, or singing, getting together, bonding together with other friends, and expressing the love and happiness that we are connected to God. And the third one is code of law. The Verbringen is one of them. Hasidic melodies. That's why Hasidic melodies are part and parcel. And the third one is Shulchan Aruch, code of law, that tells us what to do. What happens if one of the components is missing? Somebody has to understand why God is great and how much he owes God. Somebody feels connected to God, but he's not interested in getting up, going to synagogue and make a minyan. He's not interested in keeping kosher. Shabbat is not for him. You'd rather go golfing. That's action missing. Sometimes the emotions are missing. Sometimes the mindset, the intellect. I don't understand. I don't see why God is so special in my life. Chapter 16, the rabbi was going to tell us that two of the three, mind and action, is very easy to control. In other words, we can fix it. It's easy to fix. The real problem is the heart. How do I make my emotions, my heart, drawn towards God, to respect God, to obey God because we love him, because we appreciate so much and we have a deep feeling of gratitude towards God? That's what the rabbi is going to deal with. We will discover now in the second half of the chapter, actually the rabbi will share with us, and actually it's physically, the rabbi can prove it physically, where emotions are the bridge between soul and body. The way I feel affects my body. The way I feel is actually a spiritual aspect. And we're going to get to it, and we'll see how the body is affected. People, their heart races a lot faster when they fall in love. When they get scared, the skin, the hair stand up. People change color, the blood is gone from their body. And the reason is because emotion, that's the new revelation in the second part. The rabbi is going to talk about the idea that emotions is actually the bridge that connects soul and body. That's why it is the most important component. We go back to this part. What the rabbi is going to explain to us is that there are two reasons why serving God without emotions is inappropriate. We spoke until now that every man has the power to control their action. Remember, we talked about thought, speech, and action are garments, and I can control them, and I can do whatever I want, even if I don't feel like it, even if I don't understand why. I just realize this is the right thing, and I'm doing it. There are two problems with it. One, it's not going to last. You can do it temporarily. It's a temporary fix. It's a first aid. It's a Band-Aid. But it doesn't last. You cannot keep doing, in a relationship between husband and wife or friends or people, you can say to yourself, I don't understand why you're telling me that. I hate doing that, but I'll do it just because you ask. You can do it if you have no feeling for once, twice, three times, but it wears out. It's impossible. And actually the anger is building up and later it blows up. There are many, many ways to prove it. That's the first. It's a technical issue with just forcing myself into doing what's right. The second one, says the Rebbe, if I do only action and I leave emotions out, a major part of my life is singled out of the relationship with God. And God wants us to have a healthy relationship, all wholesome, where the entire body with all its components, intellect and emotion are connected. So if a Benoni is supposed to do it, the evil inclination is fighting, stay in bed, don't go to synagogue. You don't have to keep kosher, you don't have to keep Shabbat, you don't have to be honest in business. And I can force myself and say, no way I'm going to do it. Sometimes the emotion is missing. I'm not serving God with that part of my life, and therefore it's not acceptable. So these are the two reasons that the Rabbi is going to tell us that the ordinary way is the 3 steps, and one of those usually sometimes is missing. How do we deal with? Chapter 17, the Rabbi is going to deal with intellect and action. What happens if they're lacking? Chapter 16, the Rabbi is devoting into emotion because it's the most difficult one, and actually it is the hardest one to work on. So as I said, the first half, the Rabbi is going to talk about how do we deal with when there is no emotions. Here it is. This then, page 230. This then is the important principle regarding the divine service of the Benoni. The essential thing is to govern and rule the nature that is in the left part of the heart by means of divine light that illuminates the divine soul abiding in the brain, and to rule the desires of the heart. In other words, the ordinary way the Benoni is supposed to have convinced that this is the right thing to serve God and to stay away from sin, but at the same time to affect also his heart. To enable him to master his desires, the Benoni requires, in addition to the natural ability of one's mind to govern his heart, the help of the divine light which illuminates his mind upon contemplating God's greatness. This mastery of one's nature and desires is achieved when he meditates in his mind on the greatness of the blessed infinite God, so as to create through his understanding a spirit of knowledge and fear of God in his mind. In other words, he is walking out down. He starts with the understanding how great God is. God is caring about him. God provides him oxygen. God provides his surrounding, his people that is surrounded by his talent, his IQ, his success. And that in turn brings the awakening of his heart. This knowledge, says the Rebbe, and fear will cause him to turn away from the evil condemned by the Torah or by our sages, even for a minor rabbinic prohibition, heaven forbid. And then once his heart is awakened and connected to God, he's going to also affect his action. He's going to stay away from gossiping. He's going to stay away from lying. He's going to stay away from non-kosher food, because the mind and the heart are all convinced that that's not right. Contemplation on God's greatness will bring about also a love of God, which will reveal itself in the right part of his heart and sit of the godly soul's emotions faculty, with a longing and desire to cleave to him by fulfilling the precepts of the Torah and of the rabbis and the study of Torah, which is equivalent to them all. It will make him study Torah by day and night. As the Alter Rebbe has already pointed out, the commandments cannot be performed fully, that is, with the totality of one's being, unless the performance is motivated by love of God for the fulfillment of the positive commandments and fear of God for avoiding transgression of the negative commandments. When one's observance is so motivated, his love and fear of God permeates the performance of the commandments and enhances them with their power. I'll explain it in a moment. Similarly, however, this is true only of a love and fear that are openly felt in one's heart. What if, despite one's effort of meditating on God's greatness, he cannot excite himself to an arousal of love and fear of God? In answer, the Alter Rebbe now goes on to say that even if the love and fear born of one's meditation remains hidden in one's mind and heart, in a state which the Alter Rebbe refers to as the tevuna, an intellectual love, they still permeate his performance of the commandments as though these emotions were open and aroused. So the rabbi said to us until now, the order for which we serve God is we understand why God need to be our part of our life and who we are. That brings love or fear of God, and therefore it brings to action. We actually serve God. What happens, the Rebbe is asking, if the emotions are not awakened? I don't feel love of God. I do not fear God. Yes.
You read my mind. What will make a person who has been religious all his life, who doesn't think about these things, what will make him turn into something? Is it exposure to people who
That's the rabbi is going to talk about.
I didn't read it.
I'm going to turn the table now. I'm going to ask you, how long have you been married?
Well, I was married 52 years.
52 years.
Born
You was born married. Oh, let's hear about that. Just like you, right? Same question. What do you tell somebody who's been married for 50 years and he has no love for his spouse?
Well,
He does what's right because he's married. Otherwise, you'd kick him out the window. He is married because he understands that for tax reasons, they should be married. But there's no love and fear. Do you think it's rare or huh? How do you know?
There's a lot of people who just living because it's cheaper.
That's the biggest problem in our life. You need to understand that what we talk about, I read it as if it's between us and God. It reflects the relationship between other people. So I'm turning the table to you. You are an expert because you're married for 52 years. You're born or married. Huh?
Long suffering. I heard someone say in married over 70 years, the secret of that is they never talk to each other. Seriously, it's not a
God
joke.
forbid. Oh, yeah.
What do you want to hear?
I want to hear if you believe that there are people who are married and they still do what's right in the marriage, but they feel no love, no relation, there's no emotions. Of course, right? It's obvious, right? What do you tell them? Do you think it's acceptable?
Well, you say, what do you tell them? How do you know what they're doing? I mean,
If they tell you so,
Get divorced.
you tell them to get divorced?
What are they good doing?
Put the work into it.
The Rebbe has an answer for that. Because that's what the Rebbe is going to talk about. Let's hear, Herman.
Somebody's married to.
How long have you been married?
42 years.
42 years.
Best in my years in my life. And anyway. I'm saying the right thing.
Because you're sitting next to you.
It's a bit reason. There's such an individual. I know some people that are married, they don't feel love for each other. They sort of respect each other. They're comfortable with each other. Economically, it's comfortable to be married. They stay.
So what's your advice? It's okay. The status quo, where there is no emotions, is not doing something wrong. They're doing what's right.
It is okay.
He's providing for his wife, he or she. They are providing for each other, and they are faithful to each other, and they understand why being married is important. As I said, it saves for the taxes, the children will not be embarrassed, but there is no emotions. You say it's okay?
They're very comfortable with our way of living.
I say
Is it
ochun
okay?
vei. You know what ochun vei means? Oy vavoy, you know what oy vavoy?
It's not okay.
I think it's the worst, the worst situation that can be. I had many times, the one that shocks me until today, I married off a couple, very religious people. You don't know them. Nobody was here when it happened. Grandparents were very wealthy, and we did it at the Rimlin. It's a very a fascinating story how they connected. He went to yeshiva for 3 days, and the girl's friends went to yeshiva for 3 days in the winter. There is a yeshivacation. Anybody heard of yeshivacation?
Mhm.
There is a program during winter break every year in New York that they do for professionals who wants to experience yeshiva for boys. For girls, there is another one also. They do it sometimes in Key Largo and Key West, Rabbi Manis Friedman. But anyway, this boy his grandmother connected with us very well. And the young boy decided to become observant despite his grandmother. She was the macher, and she took him off the wheel, which was a big number. But one day he said to me, my grandmother don't want me to go away for yeshiva because she's going to run the businesses. They had over 1,000 apartments for rent. So it was a big business. But convinced my grandma to go to yeshiva for 2 weeks. What? I'm not a dog. I deserve a break. So we agreed. I talked to the grandma. I was very close with the grandma, even though she was not a member, but she came to study a lot here. And she agreed to send them for 2 weeks to yeshivacation. What's funny is he came in on a Thursday for 10 days. And on Thursday night, he felt not good. He only went one time to the hall to study. He went back to the room. He stayed there for Friday and Shabbat in his bed. And after Shabbat, he felt that he needs to go back. He had a flu or he got something. And he went back. But in the room he was assigned, there was another boy from another city. I will not say the name. And that boy just met him for a little bit, says, there is a girl in my town who I think is perfect for you. And he came back, he got better, but now we made the connection and they dated. And I married them 6 months later. I married them in the summer. And they had a very blessed marriage. They have 2 children. The daughter, the oldest, just got married to a real religious man. They live in Yerushalayim. He lives in Yerushalayim now. Anyway, 10 years later, he came to me and he says, Rabbi, I can't stay in a marriage. I said to him, have you tried? He says, yeah. So I said, did you talk to your mom, to your friends? His grandma was gone already. So he said, yeah, my mom gave me advice. She told me, if you're not satisfied, go and cheat, but remain married. I says, really?
What a mother.
Then I says, he says, by the way, my friends who know me very well and know the relationship all told me that's exactly what they do, and they advised me to do that. Until today, I'm still shocked. He ended up getting divorced. They both remarried, and they are so happy now. It's just amazing how God runs the show. One couple I know very well. They live in the state of Florida. The man, he lives in New York, in Crown Heights, actually. And he's remarried, and they had a child, and then the wife did not have, but the husband she married had 4 children. She raised them. And they are both very happily living together. So, but for 10 years, they created 2 children. Maybe that's the reason. All I'm saying is the shock until today is that it's so prevalent for people to tell you if you have no emotion. The wife was provided everything. She was a good cook. She was a good wife. She was there for him, but he didn't feel, there was no connection. And he gave me some examples. And yet people feel that stay in the marriage and just fill that void in a different ways, which is obviously very forbidden. Back to our discussion, this is what the rabbi is dealing with. Emotions is one component that must be in the relationship. Technically, it will not last unless you have the emotions. B, if emotions are lacking, you are not wholly connected. You are missing. The intellect is there, the action is there, but there is no emotions. And the rabbi is dealing with relationship with God. We are going to be, it's very easy to apply it to man. Says the Rebbe. We continue on page 232. And as I said, sometimes the intellect is lacking. I don't understand why. It doesn't make sense to me. And sometimes the action is lacking. I understand. And it makes me feel good, but I'm lazy. I'm not interested. There may be many reasons. So they added the first and the last, the intellect and the action will come in chapter 17. Right now, we're dealing with the difficult one, which is emotions. And the rabbi, as I said, we're dealing only in the first half of this chapter. The second half, we will see that emotions actually are such a crucial bridge that connect between spiritual and the material universe. We continue on page 232. Furthermore, one must know an additional important principle in the Benoni service of God. Even if one's intellect and understanding are incapable of producing a revealed love of God in his heart, in other words, he has the intellect, he understands why it makes sense, it's the right thing to connect to God, it's a blessing, stay away from sinning and angering God, but it does not awaken the emotions. My heart is not there. To make it burn as it ought with fiery flames, with a desire and longing and a passion manifestly felt it in the heart to cleave to God. Instead, the love is hidden in his mind and in the recesses of his heart. In other words, he does not have a clear emotional attachment to God. The rabbi, this is an addition that the rabbi added later, and the rabbi is going to explain the reason why. It's pure Kabbalah. I'm going to share it with you, and we will not delve very deep into it. Says the Rebbe. At this point, the Rebbe inserts a note stating that one's inability to reveal the love in his heart does not indicate a fault in his meditation. The cause may well be inherent in the spiritual root of his soul. Says the Rebbe, some people, the emotional component of their life towards God is different. And therefore, it's not happening. It's not because there is a fault. There is nothing wrong. There is nothing missing. It's just the way the person is. Says the Rebbe. The reason for this inhibition is that this person's intellect and nefesh, ruach, and neshama derive from the so-called ibur, conception, and concealment within the supernal understanding, and not from the stage of leida, birth, and revelation, as is known to the students of the Kabbalah. I'm not going to delve into it.
Saying they're born that way. Or he said.
Yeah, but that's not what he's saying. The Rebbe is saying that anyone who first there are 5 levels of soul. We are dealing with the 3. Those who have been to last week's JLI, we talked about the 5 levels. The 3 that enter the body are nefesh, ruach, neshama. The way they come in the ordinary way is each level creates another level, and it goes down. Sometimes the impregnation of the next level does not come to full fruition, and it goes down prematurely. That's what I call conception versus birth. So there are souls whose brains to awaken emotions is not fully developed spiritually. And therefore, as much as they contemplate and understand what's right and how healthy it is for me, it will not create the emotion. Yeah, men have that. It's very prevalent by men. Men, to get them awakened emotionally is very, very challenging. I grew up in Israel in the 70s. Even if a boy would cry, they would mock him down. They'll make fun of him, because expressing emotions by men is very challenging, even today, till today. And there are many examples. I don't want to get to it. So what the rabbi is saying, there are people that will not have the emotions connected to God or awakened fully, even though the mind is the one to awake them normally, and the mind is doing its job perfectly. It's because the way their soul is, that the emotions are being created from the mind in a premature way. It's like a fetus. It's not a fully matured birth. And therefore, because it does not go through the full expression, the full process, the creation is lacking. And therefore, they will lack emotions. So that's the reason from Kabbalah point of view. Now, Briefly, this means, okay, here is giving you, the rabbi is explaining similar to what I said. In human emotions, born of the intellect, that is, a love of God is born through meditation and God's greatness. There are two states. One, where the emotions has already been born and revealed, and two, an earlier stage where the emotions is still part of the intellect. In this latter stage, the emotion consists merely of an intellectual inclination towards the object of one's understanding. These two, so in other words, you have two stages in developing emotions. One, I fully understand and comprehend why I should connect with somebody, why that person is good for me, and that creates love. Another one, some people, that it was premature and it will not develop into a full mature emotions. These two stages, I'm going to show it you about dating, how important it is. These two stages are similarly found in the divine attributes to which the human emotions are analogous. The divine attributes, the midot of kindness, chesed, severity, gvura, etc., prior to their existence in the revealed states, are concealed within and encompassed by the supernal intellect bina, which is the source. The soul, in turn, stems from the divine attributes and hence reflects their characteristics. Thus, those souls which derive from the attributes as they are in the revealed state possesses the quality of revelation. That is, they are capable of bringing their love of God into a revealed state, whereas the souls deriving from the concealed states of the attributes lack this capacity, and their emotions remain concealed within their intellect. Now the Alter Rebbe goes on to describe a love of God as it is concealed within one's intellect. So let's summarize what the problem is. The problem is the proper way to serve God, because if we want it to be lasting and to be effective on the entire person, is to have intellect, to be convinced, to be understanding why connecting to God and serving God and staying away from offending God is the right way. And it should awaken our emotions of love and respect for God. What happens if someone is lacking? The reason is because there's nothing wrong with that person. He's trying, he's doing what's right, but it will not awaken emotions. I want to show you that in a relationship, when it comes to dating, thank God I have some experience. The emotions is a major component, and for a yeshiva boy, for boys who are usually emotionless, because all they do is they study, have to study. They don't meet girls, they don't see girls, they stay away from home, so there's no mommy, there's no daddy, and the emotions are kind of shut down. Now, when they date, the most important component is the emotions. They need to feel a connection in the heart. It's called Meshichat Alev, that the heart is drawn towards the other person. If that part is lacking, the rabbis advise us to continue dating until perhaps it will be awakened. But if it doesn't happen after 3-4 dates, we tell them it's not for you. Even though they both want the same thing, even though they both come from same backgrounds, even though all the components are a match, if there is no emotional connection, bond between the boy and the girl, the most important component is missing. And what's wrong? What's wrong is that everything that they have in common is going to be temporarily, is not going to last. Because you need to have all three components, and emotions is the most difficult one to control. That's the point the Rabbi is making. As we'll see in the intellect and the action, there are tools that can help us bring us to where we want. Emotions is very elusive. It's either there or it's not there. And as the Rabbi is pointing out, some people are born with the inability to have a full emotional expression or connection. And that's something the Rabbi is dealing with. And the Rabbi explained, sometimes people don't have love and fear of God except the hidden love. This means that the heart comprehends with the spirit of wisdom and understanding in the brain, that is, instead of being excited with the love of God as it ought to be, the heart merely experiences an understanding of the greatness of the blessed infinite God, before whom all else is as naught. for which reason it is fitting and due unto him, blessed be he, that the soul of every living thing should pine for him to cleave and to cleave to and become absorbed in his divine light. In other words, he knows what's the right thing. However, and it is likewise fitting for his own soul, the nefesh and ruach within him, to languish for him with a fervent desire to leave their sheath, that is, the body, which surrounds and conceals the soul, like a sheath, in order to cleave to him. However, so intensely his thoughts continue, should his nefesh and ruach long for God, that only against their will they do they dwell in the body. They are bound to it like deserted wives, literally living widows, who are bound to their husbands and are forbidden to remarry as long as their husbands who left them are alive. Anybody heard of the idea of living widows? You heard. You have a man who is married and he disappeared and there is no trace of that man. The wife cannot remarry. Why? Because there is no proof that the husband is dead. If the husband was dead, then you know for sure she can remarry. She's a widow. We call it a living widow because she has no husband. On the other hand, she cannot marry. So she's live widow.
There's also the case where God was just like if his wife forget.
What?
There's also the case where guys will not give their wives a get. They're around, but just.
Okay, that's something else. That's called aguna. Aguna is the husband is preventing from giving a get. Last week I read in the news that the chief rabbi of Israel went into to jail, and they performed 10 gits. 10 in one shot, which was very unusual. 10 men were convinced to, because of the situation in Israel now, people are coming back to the reconnecting and realizing that perhaps they should be a little more humble and reconnected with their soul. So there were 10 men who agreed to give get, and most likely they were sitting in jail because they refused to give get. So this is a different story. Aguna is a different. By the way, in Israel, it's unfortunately very prevalent because you have soldiers, young men who are married and are sometimes they fall in battle and there is no proof that they're dead. It could be they're captive. There is a famous submarine. Anybody heard of Dakar?
Dakar, yes. Mediterranean, 1979,
Oh, not 79, 59.
59.
Two submarines were purchased from France, and they were underway, very advanced submarines. They were on the way back to Israel. One made it, the other one disappeared and never found. On its belly, there were, I believe, 29 men. From the 29, I believe about half, maybe 10, maybe more, were married. And the rabbis were struggling to allow the young women, 22, 23, they couldn't remarry because they feared that the Egyptians have captured the submarine and they did not want to reveal it. Later on in the peace accord in 1978, when Sadat came to Israel, the first thing is they asked permission to search in the Mediterranean coast under the territory of Egypt, and they given permission, and Sadat promised that they never had anything to do with the Dakar. When the Titanic robot or submarine, whatever his name is, Curious, found the Titanic, the government hired. It's like I believe $100,000 per hour. That's how much it cost. They hired and they traced the route that they were going, and they found them right under where they searched for. They say hundreds of times. But because it's almost 1.5 miles down below, it's so dark that you cannot find, but they found it actually. So it turned out that there was a fault and it sunk without even sending traces of warning signs. So there was nothing. What's amazing is I knew some people, relatives, brothers and brother-in-laws, there were the officers in charge. One was unmarried and the other was married. And they exchange last minute, they will schedule each in a different submarine. And nobody can explain why. The married one was supposed to be under the car, and they decided to switch. So the married one survived, is one, and the unmarried one, in other words, another woman was prevented. But this is called living widows, where the widow is alive because she cannot remarry. By the way, later on, the rabbis approved, the rabbis allowed them to marry. We have also a captain of an Phantom in Lebanon War, the first one, Ron Arad, the longest missing pilot. He was in the back, a co-pilot. He was ejected from a Phantom that was hit. The pilot was rescued, very heroic. There is a movie how a helicopter, while gets being fired, he lifted the pilot and they flew while the pilot is holding on to the ocean. The co-pilot, Ronaran, disappeared. Now they say they proved that he was injured, and they took him and they buried him someplace because it's impossible to survive. His wife at the time, again, he was 24, 25, his wife remarried, and the rabbis were, based on proof, were able to, testimonies, but some testimonies were contradicting. But the bottom line is she's remarried. She had moved on with life. This is a major issue in Jewish law. Says the Rebbe that the neshama, the soul, knows full well how valuable the connection to God is, and knows full well the reason that the connection is not established is because the body is like a prison, a confinement that don't allow the soul to connect to God. And the soul feels like a living widow. You can imagine a wife, a young lady, got married, in love with the husband, and the husband disappeared one day. They don't know what happened to him. She hopes that he's not alive because she wants to move on. But at the same time, there's no proof. She's not allowed to marry. The soul, the emotion, the feeling of the soul is exactly the same. Now, the soul knows it, feels it, and feels imprisoned by the body, yet it will not awaken the body to fall in love, to feel connected to God. Because, as the rabbi is explaining in the note in Kabbalah, there is some component missing that went a little premature. Says the rabbi, in the present state, the thought cannot grasp God at all, except when it grasps and vests itself in the Torah and its commandments. By studying Torah and observing its commandments, one grasps God's will and his wisdom, which are one with God himself, as illustrated previously by the example of one who embraces the king, even though the king wears many garments. In other words, the soul understands, the soul cleaves, connects to God. And the body accepts that and knows it's the right thing. And the body is performing what's right. The body is serving God, studying Torah, performing and so on. But the body does not allow for emotions to be awakened. There is no emotions. Although the king is dressed in his robes, this does not detract from the royal embrace. Similarly, although the Torah and its commandments are clothed in material matters, yet since they express God's will and wisdom, when one grasps them, it is as though he grasps God himself, and therefore all the above thoughts pass through his mind and heart and lead them to resolve that it is therefore fitting and proper for them, for his nefesh and ruach, to embrace God with all their heart, soul, and might, this means, in a practical sense, to fulfill the 613 commandments in act, speech, and thought. And the thought being that comprehension and knowledge of the Torah is explained above in the previous chapters, that through Torah and the commandments, one grasps God himself, so to speak. And so the rabbi goes on to say to us that he has the full understanding how God is great and how important it is to embrace God and to be connected to God. And he actually does it, but it does not awaken his emotions. There is no love, there is no fear. Thus, we see that what motivates this person's actual observance of the commandments is meditation on God's greatness. This brings about the realization that one ought to strive to bind himself to God, a bond which can be achieved only through the commandments. He knows that the only connection to God is mitzvot, is Torah and mitzvot. Consequently, when the Benoni ponders this subject in the recesses of his heart's and mind's understanding, and his mouth and heart are in accord, that is, what his heart feels finds full expression in his speech, in that he fulfills with his mouth, in his speech, the resolve of his mind's and heart's understanding, namely to direct his desire towards God's Torah meditation, meditating on it day and night in oral study. In other words, he's trying to get the heart in line with action and thought, but it doesn't work. And when his hands and other bodily organs too carry out the commandments, as was resolved in his mind's and heart's understanding, then when he implements his resolution, this tevuna, the intellectual emotion, which cannot properly be called love or fear, but tevuna, literally understanding, is clothed in the act, speech, and thought of the Torah and its commandments, providing them with intellectual power, vitality, and wings that enable them to soar on high. So I'll explain in a moment. For so it is written in the Zohar, Torah without love and fear of God does not soar aloft. So I'll stop right there and explain. The the Baal Shem Tov once walked into a synagogue in a village, and upon praying there, he turned to the crowd and he says, this house of prayer is full of prayer. It's overloaded with prayer. And the townspeople were excited. Oh, it's a holy place. And he says to them, no. What I mean is that you pray just as a lip service. So your prayer does not ascend up to God. It stays here. So the luft, the air in the synagogue is overcrowded with prayers because it did not have ability to go up. Here is a point that the rabbi is introducing for the first time, but it's going to take a long, very detailed explanation. So, being the rabbi just touched upon it, we need to explain it. The Zohar tells us that every animal that flies needs wings. You cannot have one wing. What happens if you're missing one wing? You won't be able to fly, right? By the way, that's why the legs by us too. You need both. Unlike love and fear in the emotions that are part of the body, which this is another discussion, there are some parts of creation that you must have both. Eyes, you can survive without one. Hands, you can manage, God forbid, but you can manage. Feet, if one is missing, the function of the second foot is not the same. It's impossible. It's different. The same is about wings in animals. Wings only when you have two. Every time I do a mitzvah and I study Torah, they must ascend up high. How do they ascend up and high? They must have wings. What are the wings? Love and fear. Love is the right wing, fear is the left wing. Anybody heard that before?
No.
Nobody. Ali?
No.
You don't know,
You don't know nobody.
It's the right, it's the left,
Love,
it's the right.
right. Love is the right and
It's the right.
fear is the left.
It's the left.
Where does that come from?
Zohar, and we will see it in so many places. The Alter Rebbe once visited a town called Shkalov. Shkalov, a very famous town of Misnagdim, of the anti-Hasidic. And there was a famous rabbi, I don't remember his name, I think it was Rabbi Yoshua. He was a very known Gadol. And he turned to the Alter Rebbe and he said, you guys are saying that you need to awaken your love and fear for God before you perform a mitzvah. That's why we study Tanya or Hasidut before prayer. So the prayer should have a neshama, a feeling, a connection, because otherwise it's not going to rise. Well, where is it coming? He asked him, where is it coming from? So he said to him, it says in Zohar that the words are, mitzvot without wings will not fly high. So the rabbi says that Zohar, I want Talmud. I want from the Talmud. So the Alter Rebbe, which was a Ilui, turned to him and he says, in the tractate Psachim, it deals with Passover. It says over there, the Gemara says that in the book of Psalm, one place says that God, the study of Torah and commandments reaches up high to the sky. The other verse says that the study of Torah and God's commandments reaches above sky. Ask the Gemara, how come it's a contradiction? Either it reaches up to the sky or above the sky. That's Talmud, that's not Kabbalah. And so the Talmud, one that comes with a soul, a neshama, will go above sky. One without neshama will reach up to the sky. And therefore he says the neshama is love and fear of God. That's the emotions. The emotion is the neshama, the life to it. Otherwise it's dead. So this Gaon was so impressed, he turned to him and he says, I'm moved. And he stopped fighting the Hasidim for that. He did not turn a Hasid, but he stopped speaking bad about them and did not allow to hear such any. In other words, it's in the Talmud. Now you got an answer for your question? All right, less or more, but it's in the prayer, by the way, on Friday night we talk about it. Train Godfin, 2 wings, it's in Aramaic, are the tools that elevate the prayer or the mitzvah or the study of Torah to God. What happens if I lack those? The rabbi is going to talk about later on how crucial they are. I told you, emotions the rabbi is dealing with is the most difficult to awaken, to create. Speech, action and intellect is something the rabbi is going to deal with later because it's a much easier one. This is a major issue. And number 2, it's a very crucial component to create a proper action. And that's what the rabbi is saying here now. The rabbi is addressing, he's answering actually, you didn't pay attention probably. The rabbi is saying that when I do a mitzvah and there is no heart into it, my heart is not there, it's dead. If it's dead, what's the difference between alive and dead? Alive can stand up and rise up. Dead person, a dead animal is down. Wings are needed for every deed I do. It's in the relationship and as well as between us and God. If I do a mitzvah without a heart, there is no wings. The rabbi, I'm going to show it to you. We're going to deal with this idea of wings on a long time because there's many sides, many angles to deal with. One of them is the rabbi is going to tell us, don't worry if you had no wings to the mitzvah you performed, because later on you are able to revive it. You can put wings into it. So therefore, action is what counts. You create something. But the proper way to serve God is with wings. Yes.
He said, mitzvah without a heart. What do you mean?
Heart is emotions, love and fear. Wings.
I think the mitzvah not real doing mitzvah. You have to be feeling for it. You do mitzvah, you're feeling it. You're doing something.
Have you heard of mitzvah sanoshim melumoda?
No.
Never heard that?
No.
No.
The prophet is rebuking the Jewish people for performing mitzvot, mitzvah sanoshim melumoda, as someone who is trained on a autopilot without the emotions. Autopilot. Have you heard of autopilot? The prophet 2,500 years already talking about it. Ali?
A question about which came first, the chicken or the egg? I thought we're reading in a lot of this material that doing the mitzvahs will elevate the love and fear of God. I understand the opposite too. If you have the love and fear of God, he will get you to do the mitzvahs. But just doing the mitzvahs on their own, I thought was also helping to love, to elevate.
It's a quick, you're very correct. Thank you for pointing out. Ali is asking a simple question. We studied before that through the action will awaken the emotions, right? That's the question. That's a quick fix. It's not a permanent fix. In other words, on a one-time basis, on a temporary situation, that's what's right. You have no emotions, do the action, and the action will awaken hopefully the emotions. But that's not something to live by for 2 reasons. One, it will not last. Two, you're missing one part of your life. The rabbi here is going to introduce the idea that emotions are much more powerful.
It breaks up the emotion.
And sometimes it wouldn't, but still you should continue doing the action because that's what counts. But it doesn't last, number one. Number two, you're missing a major component of your life. The emotion should be in a marriage. Action is what counts. We all know that. If I love my wife and I say to her, and I don't empty the garbage can every time when it's full, it's an indication that I'm fooling myself. But sometimes I don't feel like it, but I do the action. They are satisfied. However, that's not right. For one reason is I'm going to repeat it because it's so powerful. It's not going to last. You cannot just do the action if the emotions are not there. And number two, if you only do the action, a major component in the relationship is lacking. So you cannot say that you're all completely in love with your spouse. If emotions are not there, it's not going to work. The same is about God. He's dealing with God. Our relationship with God, action is what counts. However, when the actions come without emotions, there are wings that are missing. In other words, it's an imperfect mitzvah. We call it dead mitzvah in Kabbalah because it stays down here. So the Baal Shem Tov walked into a synagogue and he says this synagogue is overloaded with prayers because the prayers never ascended. By the way, the greater the kavanah, the greater the world. It goes to Yetzirah and then Bria, and based on the we will talk about it so much. But I just want to, before I address another question, I just want to say, the rabbi is going to tell us that even if emotions are lacking, the fact that my mind awakened the action, that mindset will create wings. They're not the same wings. They're not the same wings. They will elevate it only to Yetzirah.
They're not gonna last.
Right, but when it happened, that's the first thing the rabbi is saying. When it happened, in other words, someone has the inability to awaken emotions. And that's the way they were created. The neshama, when it came down, one part from the intellect to emotion went a little too fast, dropped a little early, prematurely. Then, if you come to a realization to do something, not because someone at a gunpoint says you must do it, but it came from the brains, and the brains convince you to do it, the emotions are not there, the brains will also create wings. The problem is the wings will fly very low. It's a very low flying wings. They don't have enough power to get you to a much higher. Huh?
Is there an answer for that?
Of course, we're going to get there. We're just starting now.
Well, usually you give us the answer.
Linda,
No, just a quick question. This is kind of the same idea about like, in Psalms, it talks about the gates of heaven are closed, but with tears, the gates are open. Is it because of emotion? This is different.
it's much different.
Okay.
What you're dealing with is teshuva.
Okay.
The
but it's still
shuva.
emotion, right?
Teshuva is mostly for emotions, but sometimes because I'm convinced we understand how far we went astray and we beg for forgiveness. So, but we're dealing with emotions. We will stop right here. So what the rabbi is telling us, that every mitzvah performed must have wings. The wings are love and fear. Some of us will lack that emotions. Don't worry, because the understanding that makes me do the mitzvah does create the wings that are sufficient to elevate the mitzvah closer to God. What about? All right, so slowly. I don't know the answer. We're going to study the answer.
I thought usually you tell us what the answer for this beforehand and then we read. Which is what I-
I wonder too, like maybe if it's, maybe you'll get to this. If
The
it's-
rabbi is
if
going to address, I'm sorry, the rabbi is going to say to us later on that there is a verse in the Torah, in Mishnah, where God will create the wings as a gift for someone in all earnestly tried as hard as they can to awaken the emotions that they are not there.
But it still won't awaken.
No, and God, no, it
It'll
won't.
give you the wings, but it won't awaken.
Right. But that's one part. Later, yes, Heidi.
Similar, I was gonna say that, maybe there are situations